Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back to another episode of Diagnosing a Killer, the regular episode.
Regular episode.
The regular. My name is Kenna.
I'm Koal.
How's everyone doing today?
I'm alright.
It's going okay, right? I'm like hella anxious again.
Are you?
All the time.
100% of the time.
Well, I just killed like a giant fucking roach
That was
before I sat down.
Fucking disgusting.
And it was twitchy.
It was so twitchy. I was sequestered to our closet.
Yeah,
I
I
wasn't
stepped
gonna
on
come
it,
out.
but like its back leg was like a dog when they're wet. It like shook its leg. I was like, ah! And I picked it up with a hairbrush and put it in the toilet. It was a very traumatic moment for
It was
both of us.
disgusting.
And then Koal was like, "Oh, I'm so glad I was just in that bathroom with a cockroach." I was like, "Oh no, it came from the closet that we're fucking recording
In right now. Great.
So that is our day.
I think the worst part is when you found the head.
Yeah, the head was pretty gross. I was like, "Stop looking at me. Let me do this."
Why won't you die?
I don't know if anyone else is familiar with we call them roaches, but technically they're water bugs here in Texas. They're called palmettos, and they look like a giant roach, and they fly. And some people have roaches that don't fly. Our roaches fucking fly, and they're terrifying.
I would be fine with like a hissing cockroach. I would hold one of those.
No, those things gross me the
Yeah,
fuck out.
I think it's their underbellies that are creepy too. But at least they're not unpredictable.
Just got the full heaves silently.
Give me the heaves and jeeves.
So,
Disgusting.
anyway, welcome back to another episode. This one's going to be really fucking awesome. A lot of people, I'm sure you know when you clicked on the title of the episode what we're going to be talking about. But as always, Koal does not know what we're going to be talking about. And of course, on her episodes, I don't know. I didn't want to say, as always, you don't know. And then you bring the case. But yeah, we'll get into that in just a sec.
Do it on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. We just make up something in our minds and hope that it's accurate. No, we actually spend a lot of time doing research because we love you guys and we want you to have the best content.
I'm making pho today, and I tell you what, boiling bones isn't what it used to be after
Really?
Dahmer.
Oh, God.
That's all I thought about.
That's
It's like,
so gross.
oh, I could totally pour this meat down the fucking sink, and it was
Blech.
gross, and I
is
had to think
gross.
about that. Thanks, Dahmer.
Do you want to talk about our handles before we get into the episode?
Sure. You can check us out at diagnosingakiller.com. There you will find links to merch and resources and some other cool, awesome thingies. Click our link to get a discount on our tickets to come see us at the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival in August, late August. I'm so excited. It's right around the corner.
I'm so excited too, and we just made plans to see Jennifer and Jonathan.
Yes.
I'm really excited about that.
It's going to be awesome.
Jennifer told me that she messaged Jonathan and she goes, yeah, I've been shouted out on the podcast like 3 times. Where the hell have you been? He's like, I'm busy.
We get to hang out with Lens and
yeah.
Meredith is moving.
Oh, you're
as
right.
well,
Oh my
so
gosh, we're going to have a great time.
It's going to be a great weekend for sure. And
I
we get
think-
to see all of our Patreon members.
Yeah,
Some of
absolutely.
them, yeah.
And I think we made the decision yesterday that the 3-day weekend is now going to be turned into a 5-day weekend for us. So.
It just makes sense. The schedule is going to have to work that way. It really
Yeah.
is. Just to be available at every minute for
Absolutely.
you guys, to see you guys at our booth.
Exactly. And we definitely didn't want to have to like wrap it up early on Sunday just to get home. So
Yeah.
we're staying that night as well, just to be safe.
Sure.
But we'll definitely have some things. We actually do have some things in the works for you guys. If you do come and see us at the festival, we have some free goodies that we're going to give out and maybe some other prizes, if you will. And yeah, just come check us out. Really excited. And then, of course, there's a bunch of other great podcasts that are going as well.
For sure. I'm really excited to mingle with the other podcasts.
Me
It's
too.
going to be so fun.
Oh my gosh. I want to meet Texas Wine and True Crime. I like them.
So yes, you can absolutely use our coupon code, which is DAKPOD, DAKPOD, to get, 15% off?
Yes.
Which is awesome. Check us out on social media everywhere at Diagnosing a Killer, other than Twitter, which is at Killer Diagnosis. Subscribe to our Patreon.
Yes.
There you get, $5 gets you ad-free episodes, and tier 2 and 3 it gets you that bonus episode every month on the 29th.
And I think it's about time for us to release who we're doing for the bonus episode, because it will be coming out the Saturday after you hear this. But I'll wait till the end of the episode to announce who I'm doing.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear.
Let's just say Jay Will is going to be really excited.
Oh, that's a hint.
I'll give you some time to think about that while we get into this case. So, as you know, if you've clicked on the episode, you know who we're talking about, but, well, it's going to come as a surprise.
Okay.
So, today, we are going to be talking about Nicholas Godejohn.
Nicholas Godejohn. How do I know this? Is Nicholas Godejohn... Nicholas Godejohn... Is this Gypsy Rose?
Content warning.
No, is it Gypsy Rose?
Yes.
Oh!
I was hoping you wouldn't catch on until I got to it.
I'm so excited!
Okay.
I wanted you to do this one for so long.
It's good.
Oh.
It's not good at all, but it's a lot.
I'm so excited.
Okay. Content warning. This episode contains depictions of graphic child abuse, extreme deception, and sexual assault. If this episode is not for you, we recommend you finding another episode. Remember, your mental health is very important to us, and we love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
So yes, you fucking caught on like you always do. This is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Dee Dee Blanchard. However, the killer in the story is Nicholas Godejohn, so we're going to talk about him first.
Yeah.
So Nick Godejohn was born on May 20th, 1989, in Big Bend, Wisconsin, to Stephanie Goldammer. I actually could not find the name of his biological father, and as far as I can tell, he didn't have any siblings. There's really not, like, a lot of info about his childhood.
Just single mom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, according to Nick, his parents split up around the time that he was 3 or 4, and he would state about this time, quote, "From that time forward, I was different from everyone else," end quote.
Aww.
There's really not much known about his childhood, mostly because he pretty much refuses to talk about anybody in his family when he's interviewed.
Interesting. Is it just, do you think, just out of protection for them, or?
I don't know if it's out of protection or out of, like, selfishness, honestly. Like, I don't think I think my personal opinion is that he is trying to play this innocent role. So he's like, I'm not gonna, talk about that because that's not important because I deserve to be out or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. You can tell me at the end what you think.
Okay.
So while Nick was still growing up, his mother Stephanie would meet and marry a man by the name of Robert Bobby Godejohn, and Nick would ultimately take his last name. While Nick was still in grade school, he would be diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a diagnosis we now know as being on the autism spectrum. He would state about this diagnosis, quote, "From the very first day when I was in kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, every single one of those days I was in special education. The weird thing, though, is that even though I was in special education throughout that entire time, I was considered one of the smarter kids in the classroom that I was in, just because of my high-functioning autism, Asperger's syndrome." End quote. Nick would go on to say that his childhood was very different from other kids his age, stating, quote, "I was actually basically alone," end quote. So he felt really isolated.
Yeah.
And I can imagine so. He is very, very high functioning on the spectrum. So he's probably in a classroom with kiddos that aren't as high functioning. So he probably feels isolated there. But he also feels isolated from other classmates of his that aren't in special education classes.
Yeah.
And
that's
only child,
Yeah. And I really appreciate nowadays that every child has a unique education plan.
Oh, yeah.
That's at least where our district's at. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I would hope it would be that way across the board.
Well, and it should, because everybody learns differently.
Yeah.
And I actually have a really good quote. It's from one of my coworkers. She said, "If they can't learn the way you teach, you need to teach the way they learn."
Yeah.
And I was like, I really like that. So Bobby, again, Nick's adopted father, would state about him during this time, quote, "It was hard for him to make friends. He was always by himself, pretty much grew up by himself. He had friends, not many, 1 or 2, but mainly family. We're his friends," end quote.
Like his family is his friends?
Yeah.
Aww.
It's really sweet. Nick would recall being really into computers as a kid, stating, quote, "I tried to get into computer programming, but they weren't too happy with how long I was taking to grasp it all. Ever since then, I really wasn't able to pursue any other paths of any types of careers," end quote. Due to him being let down once again, Nick became increasingly isolated in his childhood. He would comment, quote, "I kept to myself. The reason I kept to myself is because I didn't really have the social skills due to my mental disability," end quote. That's gotta be, like, so frustrating, you know?
You want to be, you have all of these wants and goals and all this other stuff, and you see people that are neurotypical achieving these kinds of goals, and, it might just not be his thing, but he probably feels like the only thing that's holding him back is that, you know?
And it really does seem that way, like, in interviews and stuff.
I bet he's so frustrated.
So Nick would continue to try to put himself out there, but in the wrong ways, unfortunately. When he was 23 years old in 2013, he would actually be arrested when he was allegedly caught masturbating while watching porn inside of a McDonald's.
Okay, well that
Escalates quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like something that's specific to neurodivergent people.
Oh, no, I definitely don't think that's the case here. But I think again, social skills might be a little different in his brain. He might not really think that that's as big of an issue as it is. Or maybe he, like, doesn't realize, like, how inappropriate that is, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty inappropriate, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that's something that you don't just do.
Yeah, exactly. So he was arrested for this, of course, and while the police were searching him, they actually located a large folding knife in his pocket. So he would subsequently be charged with carrying a concealed weapon and disorderly conduct.
Oh, he only got disorderly?
Yeah.
Not indecent exposure or any of
guess
that other
not.
stuff?
So he wouldn't serve any time for this as far as I know.
How old was he? I'm sorry.
He was 23 at this time.
Oh, so
'Cause
he was
again,
an adult.
Yeah, not a lot about his childhood, so it kind of jumps quickly to adulthood.
I mean, he could have been a registered offender.
Yeah, he
honestly.
definitely could have. So because of the isolation Nick was continuing to experience, he decided that he was now going to attempt to connect with new people online via the internet. Bobby would mention about Nick's new habits, quote, "Nick, he was lonely. He loved the internet because he was able to connect with people. He could be himself on the internet." End quote. Dr. Mark Feldman, a psychiatrist who would later assist in a documentary about this story, stated that the internet, quote, "gives a lot of people, not just Nick and not just people with autism or other mental health issues, an opportunity to expand and play with who they are." End quote. So around the age of 25, Nick would not only pursue the internet to find friends to talk to, but he was also subconsciously looking for a romantic connection as well. Because up until now, he has not experienced that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's seeing people in his life experiencing that.
Right, yeah. A connection, intimate connections, right?
Yes. So because of this, he would join a Christian dating site. He was shocked when he ended up meeting somebody on this site that seemed to be the perfect fit for him. The two ended up hitting it off right away and began sharing secrets of their feelings with each other very quickly. This person that Nick had become close to very fast was none other than Gypsy Rose Blanchard. We already know that because Coel ruined it.
I ruined it for everyone.
I was expecting that to be like a big dun 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 moment, but it didn't really work like that. Anyway, so Nick would say that he was a, quote, recluse who was going nowhere before he met Gypsy.
Aww. Going nowhere.
Yeah, isn't that really sad? So that's like the pretty much most I could find about Nick's childhood and going into adulthood up until meeting Gypsy. Now we're going to switch around and talk about Gypsy a little bit as well. So Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on July 27th, 1991, to parents Claudine, Pert, and Rod Blanchard. Claudine was just 17 when Gypsy was born, and Rod was 24 at the time of her birth. In 1991. Let's just remember that, okay?
91.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the two decided to name their daughter Gypsy because Claudine really liked the name, and Rose because Rod was a big fan of Guns N' Roses.
Oh, that's
kind of
cute.
cute, right?
I like that.
The couple would ultimately separate shortly before Gypsy was born when Rod realized he, quote, got married for the wrong reasons.
Was it because she was pregnant?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Once Gypsy was out in the world, Claudine begged for Rod to come back and be with them, but he would refuse, and Claudine would subsequently take newborn Gypsy to live with her family in Louisiana. Although Rod did not want to be with Claudine, he did want to be a part of his daughter's life, and he would be around for the first few months. When Gypsy was just 3 months old, Claudine became convinced that Gypsy had sleep apnea, and almost immediately began taking her to the hospital, and would spend multiple nights there so doctors could run tests while Gypsy slept.
She, like, afraid of SIDS or something, you think? Like, sudden infant death syndrome?
I don't know. I don't know if maybe there was, like, one night where Gypsy, like, might have, like, coughed in her sleep, and she's like, oh, shit! You know what I mean?
Alert!
Like, alert!
Oh, gosh.
So they actually had her stay in the hospital for several days while hooked up to a sleeping monitor, but the result would conclude that little Gypsy did not have sleep apnea or any signs of other sleep disorders at all.
And she was, like, 3 months?
3 months old.
Okay, so already it's, like,
Yeah.
high alert, mom.
Claudine was still convinced that something was seriously wrong with little Gypsy and would quickly become convinced that she had an unspecified chromosomal disorder. Like, just very specific.
But it's not, because it's unspecified.
Okay, well, chromosomal disorder is
She had a
specific.
general one.
Yeah, that's true. So, when Gypsy was still very young, Claudine had become convinced that Gypsy had muscular dystrophy as well, and she would have Gypsy use a walker in order to alleviate her pain.
Okay.
So that was like, I want to say like 3 or 4, probably.
Yeah, because I was going to say she has to be of walking age.
Yeah.
Which is typically, 1 or 2.
And as a child, you're not really going to, like, question your mom when they tell you to use something.
Yeah. But then she said to alleviate her pain. Do you think that Gypsy ever complained? I mean, not that that would be documented, but...
No, I don't, personally.
Okay.
When Gypsy was 7 or 8, she was riding on the back of her grandpa's motorcycle when the two were involved in a very minor accident. In this accident, Gypsy would get a superficial wound on her knee.
Okay.
Due to this injury, though, Claudine would claim that doctors issued Gypsy a wheelchair that she would be required to use.
After a minor motorcycle accident.
So all she had was a superficial wound on her knee, but Claudine was pretty much trying to say, like, she got injured worse than that. And, like, doctors gave her this wheelchair, so she has to use it. And, like, everyone else was like, what?
What?
Like, it was like a fender bender.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Or some people didn't. She probably, she's in a wheelchair because she was in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, that's true.
That's all she has to say.
So, at this point, Gypsy and the rest of her family are all under the impression that she is now seriously ill and unable to walk.
Okay.
So, again, muscular dystrophy, unspecified chromosomal disorder, and wheelchair now.
Mm-hmm. And sleep apnea, maybe.
No, well, that's not been,
Well,
diagnosed.
some type of a sleeping issue.
Yes. Claudine would frequently take Gypsy to the Special Olympics to compete. And in 2001, when Gypsy was 10, she was entered once again.
Okay,
She's still in a wheelchair.
Okay.
So she can be part of the Special Olympics.
Okay. But, that's... How do I choose my words very carefully here?
Yeah.
She's... I don't know if any of our listeners have heard this story or not, but we're assuming that this is unnecessary.
Yes.
And so she's what we can kind of agree, you and I at least, in this moment, that she is a neurotypical, able-bodied individual who is competing in the Special Olympics.
Yes, but as far as she knows, because she's been told by her mother, Gypsy, she's not able to walk. She's been told by Claudine her whole life that she has to be reliant on this wheelchair. I don't know what Claudine has told everyone else, the reasoning why Gypsy's still in the wheelchair even following the motorcycle accident.
Right.
However, muscular dystrophy, she might be trying to use that.
Yeah, and especially if Gypsy is getting used to being in a wheelchair and using a walker, she likely isn't developing a lot of muscle in her legs.
Yes, and...
Which, could also appear like she has some type of a muscle issue.
Yeah, and just to be, like, very clear, none of these have been diagnosed. None of these things that Claudine is claiming that Gypsy has been diagnosed.
Whoa.
So, again, what the judges didn't know was that Gypsy was allegedly able-bodied, like we would think. But she was entered as being 8 years old, even though she was 10.
In the Special Olympics?
Yes. So,
okay.
Let me just make it clear. 2001, Gypsy was 10. Claudine entered her in the Special Olympics, but put her age down as 8.
Okay.
Gypsy would not argue with this point, because she actually believed that she was 8 years old, because her mother had told her differently when she was young enough to not realize a birth date.
Right.
So she thinks she's 8 when she's really 10. And this is a theme that we'll see. That's why I said to remember the birth date of 91.
You have to be confusing the crap out of your kid, because, I mean, my kiddo's 7, and since he was, 4, he would say, I can't wait to be X. Right? Like, I can't wait to be 5. I can't, and then once he was 5, I can't wait to be 6. He kept track of all that on his own. So what's interesting is that she would really have to at one point say, oh, you're not going to be 5 next year. You're going to be 4. Yeah. And then really hammer that home.
Or just gaslight the fuck out of her and be like, I don't know why you thought you were turning 10 or why you thought you were 10. You're 8. Like, I don't know who told you that you were 10, but you're 8. And
that takes,
you say that enough to a child, though, they're going to believe you because they don't have the brain development to do that.
Ugh, that's messed up.
I know, it's awful. So Gypsy would also be named the honorary queen of the crew of Mid-City, a parade held during Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
It's cute.
It is thought that Claudine took Gypsy out of school due to her, quote, illnesses around 2nd grade, although some sources state that it may have been kindergarten. But either way, she had been homeschooled pretty much her entire life.
Yeah, is she 8 or is she 10? I mean, that's the difference, right?
Yeah. So Claudine would do her version of homeschooling Gypsy from then on, and this was later believed to be a way for Claudine to further isolate Gypsy from anyone outside. Because she's getting older, right? She can tell people at school,
right.
You know. Gypsy would actually later claim that the only reason she even learned to read at all was by reading the Harry Potter novels.
Aww.
So at this point, Gypsy's father Rod had remarried, and Claudine would move her and Gypsy and herself in with Claudine's father and stepmother. All three of them. She would move herself and Gypsy in with Claudine's father and stepmother.
Okay.
Shortly after they moved in, Claudine's stepmother became increasingly ill.
What?
It was later thought that while they were living there, Claudine was actually putting a weed killer into her stepmother's food, which was contributing to her illness.
My jaw was on the floor just now. I haven't heard this.
Yeah. During this time as well, Claudine would actually be arrested several times for minor offenses, including, like, writing bad checks, like, really small amounts of, like, forgery. Whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a felony, whatever.
You said that's so
minor
cute.
things.
Just the minor things. You know, a felony here, felony there.
Here, felony there. Just felonies all the way. So, when her father and stepmother began to frequently confront her about Gypsy's health, being Claudine, and now the stepmother's dwindling health, Claudine took Gypsy and the two of them moved to the New Orleans suburb of Slidell.
Okay.
So she's like, as soon as someone questions me on my shit, I'm out.
I'm out.
Just like, not with Rod, but just like she did with, I guess with the doctors, like even before, like telling her, oh, I'm not giving you a diagnosis, or maybe the Special Olympics, they moved.
Yeah.
They moved in with her father and stepmother. And then as soon as they got a little inkling of something, she's like, nope, I'm out.
Didn't she kind of keep Gypsy from Rod, though, after...
Oh, yeah. And I'll get into that.
Yeah, okay.
Well, because he was like, no, like, why are you trying
She's
to say that she has
baby.
all this stuff and it's not diagnosed?
Yeah.
You know? Because he obviously has access to her medical records. So shortly after the two, being Gypsy and Claudine, moved away, Claudine's stepmother's health just happened to return to normal.
She's totally fine.
So, yeah, like, it was clearly something that she was doing.
That is
Isn't
definitely
so scary.
something I did not know.
Really? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
I taught you something.
You did, and I feel like I know this case.
In Slidell, Claudine and Gypsy would live in public housing, living off of the child support Rod had been giving them, and medical assistance from Gypsy's supposed medical conditions.
So she's, like, claiming disability for
yes.
Gypsy.
Mm-hmm. I might have misspoken that she hadn't been diagnosed with anything, but I think up until this point she hadn't. And she will, unfortunately, get diagnosed with certain things that aren't accurate.
Well, if she's forging checks, she can forge medical records.
That's very true.
If she's going to the pediatrician's office, she's getting a paper trail somewhere, and she can totally white out that shit and make copies.
That's very true. Now, during this time, Claudine and Gypsy would visit many different specialists, mostly at Tulane Medical Center and the Children's Hospital of New Orleans. Claudine was not only claiming Gypsy's current illnesses at these visits, but now that Gypsy was suffering from hearing and vision problems as well.
And she's about how old? Because we probably don't know.
I mean, she's probably
12, 13?
12 or 13.
Okay.
So doctors would perform a muscle biopsy, which determined that Gypsy did not have muscular dystrophy, like Claudine insisted. Also,
they made
like,
a muscle biopsy? Yeah.
Like, that's so painful for no reason.
That's awful. Oh my gosh. Why would you put your child... I get that there's likely a mental disorder to be talked about here, but why would you put your child through that?
So again, I just want to be clear. They said, due to the biopsy, she did not have muscular dystrophy.
Yeah.
Although Claudine was not able to secure treatment for this disorder, she was able to get Gypsy diagnosed with multiple other illnesses that she had claimed that she had. She claimed to doctors that Gypsy was having seizures every few months and was able to get a prescription for anti-seizure medication for Gypsy. Just because she said, my daughter's having seizures every 3 months. I mean, what are the doctors going to do? Like, no, she's not.
Like, let's wait around for her to have a seizure in order to know. Yeah. That's because, I mean, they probably don't think that a mom is going to bring in their child and say that without it being true.
Yeah, exactly. Over the next few years, Gypsy would undergo several surgeries due to medical complications that Claudine would tell doctors about. And it got so far that Gypsy would actually get a feeding tube inserted as well.
Into her stomach?
Yes. So Claudine was essentially like, she can't eat solid food. She needs a feeding tube. Like, she can't keep it down. Like, everything I give her, she can't even swallow it.
That's torture.
That's so torture.
That's that you're torturing your child.
Yeah. It's very awful.
This is going to make me mad. I forget
know.
about this case. This is going to make me mad.
In August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated the New Orleans area, and as a result, Claudine and Gypsy were forced to move out of their destroyed apartment and relocate to another city with supplies set up for individuals with extra needs. When they arrived, Claudine claimed that all of Gypsy's medical records, including her birth certificate, had been destroyed in the flooding from the storm.
How convenient.
How convenient. A doctor from Missouri had suggested that this time that the two relocate there, and next month they were both airlifted, so September of 2005.
That reminds me of that documentary, The Woman Who Wasn't There, that 9/11
Oh, yeah.
lady.
Oh, my gosh.
She claimed that she lost her husband in 9/11 and that she was there. She was one of the survivors.
Such a terrible story.
Yeah, and it turned out not to be true at all. But that's the same thing with the
Go ahead, sorry. I got excited.
You got excited. With the Katrina thing, how convenient, right? Because who's going to question that?
Of course.
You used a natural disaster.
Yeah.
It's like, no, of course. Well, that makes sense. This poor woman with this disabled daughter.
And they were there.
And they were there.
No, I was going to say the documentary that you're talking about, we should do that as a mental breakdown. That would be really interesting.
That would be interesting.
So when they first arrived in Missouri, based on the orders of that doctor, Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy would live in the southwestern city of Aurora. Yep, you heard me right. Upon this move, Claudine would actually change her name and go by what most people refer to her as today, Dee Dee.
Dee Dee.
She also added an E to the end of their last name, so it's like Blanchardy.
It's like Blanchard.
Yeah, with an E.
Blanchardy.
Yeah, she did it to both of their last names.
Okay.
And so on every new paperwork, she's adding an E to their last names, and her name is now Dee Dee.
Instead of legally changing her name. Nobody would give a shit if she
Nobody
legally
would give a
changed her
shit.
name.
So we are going to be referring to Claudine thus far, and we're going to now refer to her as Dee Dee for the rest of the story. So while living here in Missouri, Gypsy would be honored by the Oli Foundation, which advocated for the rights of feeding tube recipients. She would be awarded their Child of the Year award in 2007.
Gypsy was.
Gypsy. Mhm. The attention that was growing due to Gypsy's medical problems was something that Dee Dee really seemed to revel in, and around this time, she would actually begin reaching out to media outlets and other organizations that would be willing to help them.
Oh my gosh. You know who this reminds me of? Not Octomom, because I don't think that Octomom sought out media. I mean, after a while, I think she did. But Kate, do you remember Kate and John? Or John and Kate plus 8 or whatever? God, they were like that, right?
I think so.
They're just like so media obsessed.
Yeah. They're like, listen to us, pay attention to us, give us free stuff.
Even though like give us free stuff, people. Ugh.
So, again, reaching out to media, the story of a single mother and her extremely ill child who were displaced due to Hurricane Katrina was a huge story.
Yeah, of course.
That was all over the news, and multiple people began reaching out to assist the two.
Yeah.
The following year, in 2008, Habitat for Humanity would build the two a small home that included a wheelchair ramp and a hot tub.
How does she feel? I'm
How
sure she was
do
like
you
hot
let-
tub for physical therapy. That's probably what she
How do
said.
you let people do that?
Do that for you.
And you're lying. She's a liar.
She's like a liar.
I'm pretty sure everyone's figured it out by now that Dee Dee is a liar.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a secret
Well,
anymore. She's ill.
She's mentally ill.
She is mentally ill.
She has a disorder. But the fact that it continues.
Oh, yeah.
And she's raised her daughter to be this way. Yep. And Gypsy is brainwashed.
Absolutely.
It's just
absolutely brainwashed. It's so awful. So on top of all the free stuff that they were getting, the two would also be offered free flights to and from a hospital in Kansas City, free trips to Walt Disney World, and even free backstage passes to see Miranda Lambert concerts via the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Oh, by Make-A-Wish? This is extreme.
Miranda Lambert was actually noted as sending nearly $6,000 to Dee Dee in order to further help with Gypsy's medical bills. Miranda, if you're listening, you're a kind lady.
You're a kind lady, girl.
I'm sure you're pissed.
Gosh, that's incredible.
So, yeah.
And you're just a kid. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're just a kid, and you are assuming that this is happening because you're good people.
And you're sick. Your mom's telling you that you're sick. And you're like, oh my gosh, all these people are being so nice, and they're helping me because I'm sick. Like, there's no way she thinks that she's getting the attention because her mom's a good person and she's a good person. She's like, they're helping me because I need help.
Because
and that's
I
what
need
she's
the help.
being taught, you know?
Oh,
And no one else is the wiser, you know?
Yeah.
It's only Dee Dee that knows the truth, you know?
100% of the time, you know? Like, being given things all the time.
And she had to have been, like, keeping it up at home as well, like, when it was just the two of them, because that could very easily have changed, you know, as older Gypsy gets, you know, the more she'd be able to recognize things, you know?
What's normal and what's not.
Exactly. So on top of all of this, Rod was also continuing to make his child support payments, which were totaling around $1,200 at this time.
$1,200
a month.
A month?
Yes.
Okay.
And I looked it up. It's about the same as, I mean, it's like $1,400 today, so
Yeah.
it wasn't really that long ago. Rod would also frequently send Gypsy gifts and call her on her birthdays. On July 27th, 2009, Rod called Dee Dee asking to speak with Gypsy and wish her a happy birthday. Although she was turning 18 that day, Dee Dee asked Rod not to mention Gypsy's real age, as Gypsy believed that she was just 14 at this time.
What?
She literally was like, hey, you can say happy birthday to Gypsy, but don't you fucking say that she's 18 because she thinks she's 14.
And don't say that to her.
Don't say that she's 18.
You're gonna hurt her feelings.
Literally.
Ugh. Has she not, I mean, the obvious question, has she not had a menstrual cycle?
I don't know, actually. I never read anything about that.
Because in the show, I think that they, like, hinted that she had started, I can't remember, because I only saw it once.
Yeah.
But that they had hinted that she did start some type of a cycle, or that because of the drugs Dee Dee was feeding her, maybe that was the reason it was suppressed.
Got it.
But
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
think
not
there was
exactly
any-
sure.
Yeah.
Honestly, with, like, being in a wheelchair and stuff, Dee Dee probably handled, like, most of what was going on down there, because she thinks she can't walk. Like, she probably is not even letting her, like,
Maybe.
do
yeah.
anything, you know, like that. I'm not sure.
You can definitely take medications that suppress that. I mean, birth control. You
Yeah,
know, there
for
are
sure.
certain types of birth control.
God, that's so
but
awful.
then again, she would have to be taking her presumed 14-year-old daughter to go get this.
Yeah, that's true.
To get that done.
I'm not exactly sure. I really didn't read anything about that, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that Dee Dee had some sort of way to explain it away.
Explanation.
Yeah, exactly. So again, she asked Rod not to mention that Gypsy was actually 18. So Rod and his second wife, now married, began to be worried that Gypsy was being treated, like, poorly at home with Dee Dee.
Yeah.
And they would actually often try to make plans to come visit.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
It's like sternum. Isn't that weird? That was
really
loud
loud.
that time.
I thought that was your back.
No, I think anybody that knows me personally knows that I can pop my sternum every once in a while. So I was
do
just
it
leaning
on
back in my
accident.
chair.
I do it on accident.
Oh, really?
Like, all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, Rod and his now new wife have been trying to make plans to come visit, but every time they were getting close to the visit date, Dee Dee would just change their plans last minute or tell them that, oh, something just came up.
Can't do it today.
Oh,
Sorry.
can't do it today. Medical appointment. Sorry.
So he has no custody agreement, I'm assuming, with her.
I don't think so, because she essentially is, like, keeping Gypsy from him.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you she's telling Gypsy, like, your dad's a piece of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, I just want to see my fucking daughter.
He never loved you.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So there are a variety of different things that she would come up with to avoid Rod and his wife coming to visit. But on the other side of things, Dee Dee would frequently tell neighbors that Gypsy's father was an abusive drug addict and alcoholic who had never been able to come to terms with his daughter's health conditions, and in turn was not sending them any money to assist.
Even though he was sending her $1,200 a month.
She's like, he's a drug addict, he's a narcissist, he can't accept that his daughter's very ill, and he's not giving me fucking money because he doesn't believe it.
Oh, she guaranteed that Gypsy would never run to him for anything.
Absolutely.
That's her entire goal.
That's so fucked up. Imagine the hatred that, like, after the fact, like, finding out that, like, your dad's actually a fucking nice dude.
A nice
you know?
guy that really wanted to spend more time with you.
Yeah. So neighbors at this time didn't know any better than to believe the things that Dee Dee was telling them, obviously. Mm-hmm. In fact, when they met young Gypsy, she was missing teeth, talking in a very high, childlike voice, wearing big rimmed glasses, and all around seemed like an underdeveloped kid. She seemed much younger than she actually was.
Yeah.
And of course, the teeth thing is malnourishment and, you know, nutrition, lack of hygiene.
I had heard that even on that Mommy Dearest documentary that Dee Dee had insisted some of her teeth be pulled,
Oh my gosh.
even
of
though
course
they
she
were
did.
semi-healthy teeth.
On top of all of these things, the appearance of Gypsy, when the two would leave the house, Dee Dee would bring along an oxygen tank and feeding tube for Gypsy, so neighbors didn't think anything was amiss when they heard Dee Dee's story about her medical conditions. They were like, oh, she's very clearly ill, you know? Talking about Gypsy, sorry. On top of all the conditions that she had, Dee Dee was known to have told Gypsy that all the medications she was on were going to cause her hair to fall out. So she said it was best to just go ahead and shave it off before it fell out.
She doesn't have chemo. She's not taking chemo pills.
Well, she eventually tells her that she has cancer as well.
She told her that she had cancer. She told her what, she had leukemia or something?
I think so, yeah. So she's like, your hair's going to fall out. Like, we might as well just shave it. So she would always, like, have a hat on because she didn't have any hair.
I'm sorry, but, like, that does something, especially to, you know, not to discredit anybody's experience. But, you know, I don't know. I guess just, like, being femme, your identity is, like, through your hair sometimes.
Absolutely.
And that's got to be really hard to be a young woman and not, again, not to discredit anybody else's gender experience or anything like that. But just in this specific case, she's a developing young woman and now she can't even feel pretty.
Yeah, and honestly, like, how fucked up is it that, like, you know, Dee Dee, some people don't have a fucking choice in their hair falling out. And you're literally making your daughter do that because you're lying to her. Like, fuck you. Yeah. Like, in this moment, fuck you.
It's true.
Like, that makes me so mad. Dee Dee would actually tell neighbors and friends, however, that Gypsy was undergoing chemo, and that's why she had suffered her hair loss. So she told the neighbors and friends, and I'm sure that she told Gypsy as well.
That's awful.
I know. This is so infuriating. As Gypsy was getting older, Dee Dee would increase the ways that she would control her daughter. While in public, Dee Dee would always hold Gypsy's hand, and anytime somebody would suggest that Gypsy was not as sick as she seemed, or that she seemed older than they were saying, Dee Dee would squeeze Gypsy's hand tightly to signal her not to talk. She's like, I got this.
Don't say anything.
Although she seemed very sweet to neighbors and strangers, while the two were alone, Dee Dee was known as hitting Gypsy with an open hand and a coat hanger.
Inside the home?
Mm-hmm, like when they were alone.
Oh my god.
Dee Dee would continue to give Gypsy certain medications that she did not need and lie about specific illnesses that she did not have.
She's probably wreaking havoc on this girl's body and, like, not just keeping her sick, like, as in constantly coaching her mentally, but a lot of those medications, they'll fuck up your kidneys, your liver.
Absolutely.
That's just...
And she's taking them for no fucking reason. Like...
And she's probably losing a lot of weight because her body's not having to work to keep any of that nutrients, right? Because she's being fed through a tube.
And so she's in a wheelchair, so she's not getting any sort of
exercise or any of that. Ugh.
I know.
And she does, like, in the photos, she looks gaunt and she looks pale. She doesn't look like a healthy color.
So get this is fucked up. Before most of their frequent doctor's visits, Dee Dee would put a topical anesthetic on Gypsy's gums in order to make her drool while they were at the doctor's. Due to this extreme drooling, doctors would inject Botox into Gypsy's saliva glands and then eventually remove them altogether to control it.
What?
They removed her salivary glands because they thought that she had an intense drooling problem. Because Dee Dee numbed her fucking mouth before they went to the doctor. Isn't that so fucked up?
This is torture. This is literal torture.
You can... No wonder her... Okay, at this point, and I'm not trying to be rude, no wonder her teeth were so bad, because she doesn't have any fucking saliva anymore.
Yeah.
Well, she doesn't need it to eat, because she has a feeding tube. It's fucking nauseating. Like, it's so gross.
How is this... I understand that she's apparently a master of manipulation, but I don't understand how that's... I guess the doctors are just doing what they think is right.
They're doing what they think is right, and Gypsy's not saying that that's not happening. And clearly she's old enough at this point to tell doctors, like, hey, like, that's not happening. And she won't, because she's brainwashed. So again, just not being able to produce saliva obviously was harming Gypsy's mouth, as well as the anti-seizure meds, and due to these things combined, the few teeth that she had left actually fell out as well. So she pretty much had her teeth replaced by a bridge at this point because she didn't, like, have any teeth left. I know, it, like, breaks my fucking heart.
This is so sad.
Around this time as well, tubes were implanted into Gypsy's ears to control her, quote, many ear infections. Like, she's literally using her daughter as, like, a fucking cadaver.
She doesn't see her as a person. She sees her as an object.
Yeah.
She's, like, literally uses Gypsy as an object to feed her own addiction to attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
so gross.
If you want to just call it like it is.
It's just Munchausen by proxy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were just kind of talking about, like, how people and doctors are just performing all these procedures and not really questioning anything.
Yeah.
So some were suspicious, but didn't have enough suspicions to report anything. Until a pediatric neurologist saw Gypsy Rose in Springfield. Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein was seeing Gypsy when he became intrigued about her muscular dystrophy diagnosis. He took it upon himself to order additional MRI tests and a blood test, and these concluded with no abnormalities. Again, she doesn't really have the diagnosis, but Dee Dee is claiming that she does, and her medical records were lost, remember?
Were lost.
Upon a follow-up visit with Dee Dee and Gypsy, after seeing Gypsy hold her own weight while standing up, Dr. Flasterstein said to Dee Dee, quote, "I don't see any reason why she doesn't walk," end quote.
I bet Dee Dee loved that. I bet she was just over the moon.
Yeah.
Her child is a miracle child who has just been cured.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, immediately.
Dee Dee began to explain that Gypsy had gotten the diagnosis back in New Orleans and that she was sure that Gypsy had the disease. Still having his suspicions...
She's like, my bad. I just assumed.
Dr. Flasterstein would contact Gypsy's past doctors in Louisiana, who told him that Gypsy's original biopsy also had come back negative. No medical records, that's so funny. Dr. Flasterstein was also very alarmed by the news that Gypsy did not have this diagnosis, and also shocked to find out that Dee Dee had lied about all of Gypsy's medical records being destroyed in the flood. Because, yeah, maybe all her medical records were destroyed. That doesn't mean the doctors don't have medical records.
Yeah, I was going to say, they had computers.
They're legally required to keep them for 10 years, even if you're not a patient anymore. So, it's weird. So, it was at this point that Dee Dee became suspected of suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So, if you've not heard our mental breakdown on this topic, Munchausen symptom by proxy, or now known as fictitious disorder, it's a disorder in which a caretaker intentionally makes their patient sick in order to maintain sympathy from others, financial gain, or the idea that they are needed to keep that person safe. This disorder has been classified as a horrific form of abuse and mostly happens with caretakers of children, the elderly, or people with extra needs. Unfortunately for Dr. Flasterstein and Gypsy, Dee Dee was somehow able to get a hold of the notes from the doctor and saw this suspicion written down in Gypsy's file. So I guess he, left the room or something, and she kind of looked over or looked or whatever and saw, possible Munchausen or fictitious disorder.
Classic Dee Dee.
Of course. So she and Gypsy would leave the doctor's office and never return.
She's just out in the ether. The doctor has no idea where she fucking lives. Which is probably totally untrue, but at the same time, if there's no, probable cause, I guess, to go track them down, then...
Yeah. So get this, Dr. Flasterstein actually would not follow up with his reports of his suspicions of Dee Dee. He would later state that the other employees at his work encouraged him to treat the two with, quote, golden gloves. Which, as far as I can tell, means, treat them like royalty and, be very careful. I'm not sure if they knew, Dee Dee and Gypsy from the media, or if she had, made a big deal about something in the past and they thought it was, more trouble than it was worth to, kind of question her.
I wonder if it's not, if you're gonna call them out, you better have proof. Because that's a very severe accusation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really don't know, exactly why the people, the employees told him that, but clearly something had happened in the past to make them say, listen, you gotta be really careful, around, either the situation itself or the people, Dee Dee and Gypsy, especially Dee Dee. And that's a good point that you made, because Dr. Flasterstein also stated that he didn't even think he would be believed by authorities anyway, because they didn't really have a lot of medical records available.
Yeah.
So that kind of proved his point.
It's just all, hearsay, essentially.
In 2009, however, police did receive an anonymous call stating that Dee Dee was using different names and birth dates for herself and her daughter.
She was trying to make herself younger, too.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
This caller also suggested to police that Gypsy was in much better health than she seemed on the outside. Due to this anonymous call, police would visit the Blanchard home to do a wellness check. When questioned by police about the fake names and birth dates used by Dee Dee, she explained to police that she was just trying to make sure that her abusive, alcoholic ex-husband Rod could not find them, and she was changing their names to avoid him showing up.
Okay, sounds reasonable.
It's a fucking annoying, clever idea to, use that, because she's already told all the neighbors that, so you might as well, just say that to police.
Why don't you just legally change it, though? Why are you, falsifying?
So police would actually not follow up with Rod about the situation. And
they were like, hey, are you an alcoholic?
Yeah. They would close the case, stating that Gypsy was, quote, genuinely mentally disabled, end quote. Like, they were like, oh, it must be true. Like, the ex-husband must be abusive and she must be mentally disabled.
Checks out.
Yeah.
Instead of having an actual doctor's opinion.
But then again, I'm not saying that they did right or wrong. I'm just saying, imagine their, like, cautiousness and they're like, oh shit, like, what if we follow up with the husband and all this is true? And then he finds out, because we're from Aurora Police. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's just a hard situation. Ugh. So Dee Dee was also known to have forged a new birth certificate for Gypsy, because remember the other one's lost. This actually showed her birth year to be 1995 rather than 1991.
Okay, so she's
4 years younger.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
At one point during a doctor's visit, Gypsy caught a glimpse of her paperwork that was holding her original birth certificate, stating 1991 as her birth year. I guess it was like a copy. She would bring this up to Dee Dee, who would brush it off as a misprint.
It was just a misprint.
Oh, it was just a typo.
Yeah.
On my fucking birth certificate. It's like typo.
Yeah, it's like 2020, you know, like COVID, like that whole year didn't exist.
Yeah.
1991 didn't exist.
Pretty much happening.
Yeah, we went straight from 1990 to 1992. So.
Yeah.
Whether it's your favorite browser or by app, listening to audiobooks with Audiobooks Now makes it even easier and more affordable to enjoy your favorite books. Audiobooks Now offers up their club price plan, which includes 50% off your first purchase each month and additional offers after your first purchase. Click the link in the show notes below to receive 2 months free and just $4.99 for each additional month. Get audiobooks you love for less with Audiobooks Now. Start your free trial today.
Starting in 2001, Dee Dee would take Gypsy to science fiction and fantasy conventions, where Gypsy was able to dress up and mingle with people with similar interests. Her costumes were so cute.
I know. I remember seeing those photos.
At one of these events in 2011, Dee Dee and Gypsy became separated, and the details are not extremely clear on how it happened, but ultimately Dee Dee would find Gypsy in a hotel room with a man whom she claimed to have met online. So they had apparently, like, been talking. Gypsy had her own computer. They had been talking, and he was like, I'm going to be there too. And she's like, let's meet up. I don't know if it was a sexual curiosity or just talk
friendship.
to somebody other than my fucking mom,
right?
For once, you know?
Yeah, have an actual friend.
Yeah.
Aww.
So Dee Dee would produce a false birth certificate, telling the man that Gypsy was underage and threatening to call the police on him if he did not leave immediately.
Do you think that she told the guy, like, well, my mom likes to pretend I'm 14 or 15, but I'm actually 18 or 19?
I don't know, actually. I don't really think she was 100% sure how old she was, because she saw the doctor's note that said she was 91, but
yeah,
that's the only other evidence conflicting what her mom's been telling her. So I really don't know if she knew that she was, at this point, that she was older.
But again, like, I keep going back to that. I know we talked about the menstrual cycle thing, but even just developing as a young person in general, going through puberty and stuff, you have to know, like,
or at least think.
Or you're at least a little older than what you've been told, you know?
You know, and Dee Dee pretty much, like, brainwashed Gypsy, like we've been saying, into her saying, like, yes, Mom, to, like, everything.
Yeah.
So questioning Dee Dee about her age was probably, like, way off the fucking table.
Right. But I wonder, like I said, I wonder if Gypsy knew. Like, I'm sure she knew. In some, like, shape or form.
Yeah.
She had to have known this doesn't feel right
This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So after telling the guy to leave the hotel room, Dee Dee would then turn her attention to Gypsy. She would smash Gypsy's computer with a hammer and threaten to do the same thing to Gypsy's fingers if she ever tried to escape again.
Escape? Oh, baby.
So Dee Dee thought that was Gypsy trying to say, like, save me, like, get me the fuck out of here. But I really don't think it was. I really think it was just a curiosity thing, like, with talking to a boy, you know?
Right.
Following this incident, Dee Dee would also handcuff Gypsy to her bed for 2 weeks.
What?
And put her on a leash as well. Yeah. Like, if you're going to try to escape, like, I'm actually going to hold you captive.
Oh my gosh, that's horrid.
She would also begin to brainwash Gypsy by telling her often that she filed a police report stating that Gypsy was mentally unstable. So if Gypsy ever went to the police for help, they would not believe her because they think that she's mentally ill. Yeah.
This is her mother.
Her mom. Like, the one person that you're supposed to, like, be able to fully trust.
Well, the only person that she is able to trust.
Yeah.
It's probably the only person that she can talk to. That's so
awful.
sad. And you know that Gypsy was probably in a situation where she was, like you said earlier, yes, mom, yes, mom.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what mom thinks, then I guess I must be mentally unstable. Okay, I guess if that's what mom thinks is best, I guess handcuff me to a post.
Yeah, but you're right. She is getting older, and she's not as gullible, if you will, as she once was. So she's definitely starting to kind of catch on to inconsistencies in, like, Dee Dee's story.
Yeah.
Especially, like, when it's just the two of them at home.
Right.
So although her computer had been destroyed, Gypsy would actually continue to sneakily use her mother's computer at home when Dee Dee went to bed. They had a home computer. Probably from charity. Sorry, that's not funny, but, you know, she just steals things. During this time, Gypsy was frequently seeking a romantic connection online with various people. And it was in 2012 or 13, it wasn't clear, that she would meet a man by the name of Nicholas Godejohn on ChristianDatingForFree.com.
Christian dating for free.
So, obviously
Everyone is
we
so
talked
creative.
about... Everybody's so creative. Both of their storylines, and now they meet, and we're going to go from there. So, Nick and Gypsy would begin messaging back and forth, relating on things from their childhoods, and believing that they had found, quote, true love after only a few conversations.
Oh.
Gypsy opened up about her being in a wheelchair and the fact that her mother was very controlling, but found it to be extremely sweet that Nick found her, quote, pure.
Aww.
The relationship would deepen, and the two decided to make private Facebook accounts where they could each send each other messages when they had access. While Nicholas had his own previous criminal charges for the masturbation, and Dee Dee was
at a McDonald's, let's not forget.
at a McDonald's, and Dee Dee was forcing unneeded medical procedures on her child, Gypsy was not without fault during this time. After feeling closer than ever with Nick, she would disclose to him that there was in fact nothing wrong with her. She did not need a wheelchair, and that her mother was forcing her to use one.
So she knew.
I think she knew towards this part. I don't think she knew for long before she met Nick. I really think just because she was getting older, like you said, I think she kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
And you get older, maybe you lean too far forward on your wheelchair and you put weight on your feet and you're like, oh shit, hold on. And then you try to stand up and you can, and you're like, oh shit, hold on. You know what I mean? Like, she's more aware of her, physically aware than she ever has been.
I'm not going to try to equate it in the same sense, but I think that everybody, you know, has a parental figure of some kind that they know that they are a particular way, right? Maybe Gypsy thought, this is just the way that mom wants it. It doesn't necessarily have to be my reality, but this is the way that she prefers the house. This is the way that she prefers I dress. This is the way that she prefers I use a wheelchair or whatever. This is just her preference, and I'm being a good child by abiding by these things.
That's a good point.
And not only that, but she clearly, you know, anytime that Gypsy's gone against that, it's been worse. So you might as well just, you know, stay in line and do what mom wants to do. So she could have known for a little bit, or even a year or something.
Yeah.
And then just, this is the first time that she's admitting it to somebody else.
I completely agree. I think that's a really good point. Because she also admitted to Nick that she was able to walk, but nobody else knew this, and he needed to keep it a secret. I know. Being able to share this secret with Nick made Gypsy be able to have a relationship like she'd never had before. Nick seemed like a very confident, experienced man who was domineering and intense, and everything Gypsy thought she liked in a man. Because again, she doesn't really know, right? She's never really had a relationship. On top of all of the things that Nick was portraying himself to be, he was also extremely adamant that the two meet in person very soon.
So you think he wasn't being his authentic self?
I think that I'm not sure, actually. I was going to say something and I'm like, wait, I don't know. He claims to have DID at some point, and I'll talk about that, but he almost says like he has a really nice and amazing side, which is Nick, and then he has a dark and like demonous side, and he has a name for him, but I didn't put him in here, I don't think. But either way, I think that he's overly doting because he's never really had another relationship. And it's not bad to be overly doting, but I think he thinks like being overly doting and like really intense, like sexually, is like what girls want. Almost.
I see. Well, and especially in her situation when she's already saying, my mom forces me to do these things, and I bet he feels kind of like a knight in shining armor.
Exactly.
Type, like, I'm going to scoop you up and take you away.
Exactly. And not to mention, he mentions himself a lot that his social skills are not fully developed because of his autism or his Asperger's diagnosis. So that is probably something as well that's affecting the, over kind of stimulation of verbiage. I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe he's not necessarily portraying a character, but maybe he's portraying an example that he's seen before, like maybe in movies or television.
Exactly. Okay. We know he watches porn because he got caught doing
That's true, yeah.
Anyway, so in 2014, was that funny?
Yeah. Help me, stepbrother.
Oh my gosh. So in 2014, Gypsy would confide in her 23-year-old neighbor, Aaliyah Woodmansey, I think is how you say it,
Woodmansey?
That her and Nick had discussed meeting in person and even eloping together.
Oh.
She opened up about her and Nick's talks, including the names of their future children, and the fact that Gypsy had 5 separate Facebook accounts to keep in contact, like all with different names.
Whoa.
She would also mention that their conversations involved talk of BDSM, which she thought at the time was something she was really interested in. Gypsy, however, would later admit that Nick was the one who almost convinced her to talk about those things with him, as it was like more of his thing, like the BDSM thing.
Well, you said that he kind of internet spiraled, so I'm sure, porn was probably a big thing of that. And...
He probably saw a lot of shit. He was like, nothing's interesting, They seem like they're having a great time.
They look like they're enjoying themselves.
So Aaliyah, the neighbor, was very concerned, as she believed that Gypsy was many years younger than her, although they were really close in age, and she told Gypsy that she was worried that she was being taken advantage of by an online sexual predator.
Like an older person.
Yes. She would later state about Gypsy's plans with Nick as, quote, fantasies and dreams, and nothing like this would ever really take place, end quote. She was really worried about Gypsy.
She was worried, but she wasn't overly concerned, or she thought that it was so, like, it was too good to be true, it was too extreme, that this is going to escalate in a way that's not okay.
I think both. I think she was like, Gypsy, like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, and this guy's probably taking advantage of you. Like, I don't think it's a smart idea to try to meet him in person.
I see.
So Gypsy would not take Aaliyah's advice for long, and her and Nick would actually make plans to meet in 2015. So their plan was to both go to the same movie theater at the same time and dress up in costume for the movie, sci-fi movie. They would just happen to bump into each other and strike up a conversation about their costumes. And after becoming acquaintances, they would watch the movie together, and hopefully he would be able to talk to Dee Dee at some point during all this.
Okay, so this is like, we're coming up with this elaborate ruse to look like this is the first time we're ever meeting.
Yes.
Clearly can't come clean to mom about the fact they've been talking.
Yes.
Okay.
So their plan actually worked, and they were able to run into each other at the movie theater. However, instead of simply going in to watch the movie, Gypsy took the opportunity to take a bathroom break and insinuated that Nick meet her in there. He would, and the two would engage in intercourse in the bathroom.
What?
A meeting that Dee Dee would immediately find out about when she realized that Gypsy was taking way too long in the bathroom. Did you know that?
I mean, I feel like I did, but that last thing you just said about that she's taking too long in the bathroom, it's like, well, I mean, you're the one that's portraying her as a disabled person.
Well, yeah, I put that part, taking too long. Like, she didn't say that, but, like, well, I would just assume that's why she was like, let me go check on her. Like, I better go, look.
And I'm in no way gonna talk about speed here, okay? But... I'm just assuming it might not take that long.
I mean, he's very excited to see her, so it might not have been that long. But after discovering this, Dee Dee would forbid Gypsy to ever see Nick again.
Oh, so she, like, straight up knew. Like, she knew.
Like, she knew that they were in there together. I don't know how much she saw or how much she actually knew, but she knew that they went to the bathroom together.
Maybe waited outside the bathroom and then they came.
Yeah, and it was very clearly a very similar situation to the hotel incident in Dee Dee's eyes, right?
Yeah.
So, after the incident, the abuse Dee Dee inflicted on Gypsy would continue to get worse, and Gypsy would actually still secretly be in contact with Nick via social media. So, of course, the abuse increasing after the movie theater situation, and her current situation at home just, like, never being good.
Yeah.
Gypsy ultimately thought that the only way to get out of her situation was if her mother was no longer in it. So, Gypsy stated about the beginning of this conversation, quote, "Me and Nick were talking one night, and he said that he would do anything to protect me. And I asked him, anything? And he said, yeah. From anybody, I asked? He said, yeah. Even my mom, I asked? He said, yes. And that's when this plan kind of started to develop into a murder plot." End quote.
I can't imagine feeling... Well, first of all, like, I can't imagine, even that being a thought in my head.
Yeah.
But to feel so cornered... and so defenseless that just backed up into a corner that you have to, like, plan to murder someone.
Well, it literally reminds me of, like, Eric and Lyle Menendez.
Yeah.
Like, the only way out of this situation is to kill the person that's causing the situation.
Yeah.
And it has to be such a helpless feeling.
Yeah.
And, like, what do I do? Like, do I continue to live in this hell? Or do I stand up for myself and do something about it?
Right.
Because in reality, I'm not going to speak for any of the listeners or even you. I'll speak for myself. If it's my life against yours, it's mine every time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's probably how she felt.
Right.
Like, at this point, it's gone on for far too long. I know the truth. And I know that this is abuse.
And she's never going to let me go.
Exactly.
She's never going to let me go, and she's never going to let me blow this up, ever.
Exactly. Something has had to give in her mind.
Yeah.
So after a little while of talking back and forth, Nick decided that he would be the one to kill Dee Dee for Gypsy in order to get Gypsy out of her situation at home. On June 12th, 2015, Nick would arrive in Springfield while Dee Dee and Gypsy were at a doctor's appointment. He would hang around the area and wait until nightfall, and then he would make his way to the Blanchard home. With Dee Dee asleep, Nick would sneak into the home with the help of Gypsy, who provided him with duct tape, gloves, and a serrated knife.
Oh, she, like, handed the stuff to him? Oh,
Yes.
so she's an accomplice.
Yeah.
Not just speaking, but is an accomplice.
Nick would make his way to Dee Dee's bedroom, shown to him by Gypsy, and Gypsy would take it upon herself to hide in the bathroom. She was actually noted as, like, covering her ears so that she didn't have to really hear anything.
Ugh.
I know.
Ugh. Heaves. Oof.
Nick would sneak into Dee Dee's room and begin stabbing her in the back, hitting her a total of 17 times.
That's not even, like, just a quick...
That's, like, overkill.
That is overkill. 17 is a lot.
That's a lot of times. Nick would later claim that Dee Dee actually woke up during this attack, stating, quote, "She ended up asking me, 'Who are you?' I said, 'I'm your effing nightmare.'" End quote. Like, cringy as fuck, but also, like, that's scary.
Edgelord. Jeez.
God, that's so fucking scary. After Nick was sure that Dee Dee was deceased, he would go grab Gypsy from the bathroom and take her into her bedroom where the two proceeded to engage in sex.
Like, right after?
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
something else. That's something tangled up in there.
One source actually stated that Gypsy was already undressed before the murder took place. I'm not really exactly sure the timeline, but Nick said that the reason he was like, "We have to have sex right fucking now," is because he had, like, cut himself, I guess, in the process of the murder, and she, like, wiped his, like, the blood off his finger, and apparently he got, like, super aroused because of it. They said it was, like, one of his sexual fantasies. And I'm like, your
Is he a
mommy
werewolf?
helping you put a Band-Aid on a cut is one of your sexual fantasies? Like, what? Anyway.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's tangled up in something else.
Something else,
That's not
for sure.
just like, oh, thankfully we can be together now.
No, yeah,
let's
it's
make
like-
love.
It's intense, yeah.
That's something else.
Like, in the next fucking room, like, I can't even imagine that.
That's horrific.
That's horrific. Nick would later state about this murder, quote, "The very second I put my foot down, I had one of those moments that you might have only had once in your lifetime. It was an angel and the devil. First, the angel spoke. It actually said, 'Take her and run.' And then you had the other part of me, that darn devil. What he..."
Cringe. Go on.
Quote, "What he ended up telling me was, 'This bitch is dead.' I got so darn enraged that something inside of me clicked. Unfortunately, that part of me wanted to come out for a very long time, and the very first opportunity I got, it didn't waste any time. The dark shadow part of me that really is triggered by anger. Once that anger clicks, I see red." End quote.
So this is something that he's maybe thought of before.
Maybe thought of before.
Or has had known that he has capabilities of being enraged that badly.
I think so, yeah. So, although he commented on the fact that he may have multiple personalities or a DID, Nick also stated about the murder, quote, "I would have done it again. I might have done it differently, but I would have done it again. I couldn't see Gypsy suffer anymore." End quote. Which is, like, really sad, but, like...
Yeah, because then it's essentially victim blaming.
Yeah,
you know,
it really
which
is.
you just told us the history of it. It's very messy.
This whole situation is very hard. Like, it's very
Yeah.
difficult to kind of pinpoint, like, who's the real victim here.
Yeah.
I think both of them are, honestly.
I think all of them are, honestly.
Yeah,
all
of
all
them,
three
yeah,
of them,
all three
even
of them,
him, because
yeah.
I feel like, you know, in a way, and I don't know what Gypsy's participation in the conversations that they had, but to really want to go murder someone for someone that you love, there has to be some kind of manipulation there. I'm sorry.
I think so, yeah.
You know,
but
and
all she was shown her whole life was manipulation. So
true.
it's a
She
wonder
knew
that
how
she would be good at it.
yeah, it's true.
It's not a wonder, I mean.
She's a pro.
So the duo, being Gypsy and Nick, were so engulfed in Facebook during this time as well, their immediate thought was to post on Gypsy and Dee Dee's shared Facebook account, quote, "That bitch is dead," end quote.
On Dee Dee's Facebook
Dee Dee and
account.
Gypsy's joint account, they posted this as a status.
It makes sense they would
course
have
they
a joint account, right? Yeah. But on both of theirs, it said "that bitch is dead."
Yes.
Okay.
So Gypsy allegedly was saying, like, I didn't want her to not be found. So I think, like, posting something like that, like, would have raised concern a little bit, but also gave us, like, time to, like, get away.
Yeah.
So she's like, I want someone to find her, but, like, I don't want to be there when it happens.
And I also want to make it ominous sounding so that it sounds like it's not me.
Someone, yeah, hacked. So after posting this, Nick and Gypsy took $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee had collected from Rod's child support. The two would then leave the home and head to a hotel in Springfield, where they stayed for a few days while planning their next move. So, obviously the Facebook post concerned some people who would phone the home and try to get a hold of either Gypsy or Dee Dee, but probably just Dee Dee, because Gypsy probably didn't have a phone.
She wasn't allowed.
Several friends and neighbors actually went to the home on multiple occasions, but knowing that it was not unusual for the two to leave the last minute for out-of-town doctor's appointments, they didn't really think much of the home being seemingly unoccupied. However, with Dee Dee's car in the driveway, neighbors and friends gathered in order to phone 911 for at least a wellness check.
I was going to ask, though, how did they get away? Because Nick drove, so they were driving Nick's car.
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
They just went in his car.
Okay.
Meanwhile, at the motel, Nick and Gypsy were running errands to get some stuff together, and in the multiple days they were planning, they were caught on security cameras at several different stores. Gypsy would later state that at this point she really believed that the two had managed to get away with their crime.
Yeah. Well, they're in love. They're
Yeah.
not geniuses.
Yeah. It's like, what is it, Bonnie and Clyde kind of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Or the fucking Ken and Barbie, whatever, killers. Mm-hmm. She thought that if and when her mother's body was discovered, it would look like she had been kidnapped, Gypsy, and she would be able to blame the crime on another perpetrator. Like, oh, they killed my mom and they took me, you know?
Yeah.
She stated, quote, "We thought we would never get caught. I felt like this is a fairy tale and I was going to be the princess that got rescued. But what started as a fairy tale ended as a horror movie," end quote.
That's the thing, is like, she's like, oh, I thought this was going to be a fairy tale, but it's like, but like, you helped kill your mom.
That's not a fucking
that's
fairy
not a
tale.
fairy tale.
Well, shit, have you ever seen fucking Tangled?
Does Mother go? Oh, yeah. Well, she doesn't really die. She just turns back into ash. She was already ancient.
But the fact that she still, that's what I was just wrote actually, she still thinks that this started as a fairy tale is wild. Like,
Yeah.
the murder plot was what started this. Like, that's a fairy tale. I think that's funny. We had the same thought. Like, I wrote that down and I was like, what?
Well, I think that maybe she thought, like, just the communication online and stuff like that. And then even, like,
Scandalous.
yeah, you know, that would be, that's romantic, you know, type of a thing. And then
it's really like a knight in shining armor kind of thing.
yeah, and who knows how many times they actually talked about this. It's not like they talked about it once and he's like, I'll be right over, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
They probably had talked about it a few times.
I completely agree. So get this. You said they're not geniuses. The two would actually mail the murder weapon back to Nick's home in Wisconsin in order to avoid being caught with it. But they mailed it to his house. Like, you couldn't have mailed it to a random address? Like,
Yeah.
you could have just changed one number and it would have gone to
It
a
would have
neighbor.
gone to a different address. But then that person would have picked it up. Why wouldn't you just discard it? Because he wanted to keep it.
Of course he fucking did.
He probably wanted to keep the murder weapon, which is even grosser.
After this, they boarded a bus back to his home as well, so they were going to go to Nick's house.
Oh, okay, so he didn't drive. It was a bunch of buses.
Yeah, I guess you're right, yeah. Several witnesses saw the two on their journey back to Wisconsin and stated that Gypsy was wearing a blonde wig and walking all on her own.
You said walking, and I forgot about what we were talking about for a second. And then I thought you were going to say on all fours. And it just breaks
on all
out into a
fours.
sprint. Yeah.
Back at the Blanchard home, police arrived but had to wait for a search warrant before entering. This is so funny because this next sentence makes no sense.
Okay.
They did, however, allow a neighbor to enter the home through a window. But they had, so the neighbor can break and enter, but the police can't. I mean, essentially.
I mean, kind of.
Though. They're not going to charge the neighbor for that.
They're not.
You know, obviously cause for concern.
Yeah.
But the neighbor kind of, I don't know if he, like, got all the way in the home. He obviously, I think he just leaned in maybe through a window.
I'm pretty sure it was a female neighbor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, the
Okay,
neighbor,
either way,
whether
a
it be
neighbor.
male or female, saw that the inside of the home was not really disturbed, but all of Gypsy's wheelchairs were there. They noted that.
So they were like, if she was kidnapped, she was scooped.
Yeah, exactly. So once the warrant was present, police entered the home and located Dee Dee's body. Police, along with neighbors and friends, immediately thought the worst when they noticed Gypsy was not only not there, but was clearly without her wheelchairs, medications, and oxygen tank.
Right.
Aaliyah, Gypsy's neighbor and friend, told police immediately that she knew about an online boyfriend of Gypsy's, and that she had actually saved some information about him in case he was needed.
Good girl.
I know,
Like it.
was
Yes.
smart. Oh, I just got chills. Police got in contact with Facebook in order to trace the IP address of the account with the posts, which turned out to be in Wisconsin.
Again, they're in love, not geniuses.
Yeah. Over 60 people would attend a candlelit vigil for Dee Dee in downtown Springfield the night after the body was discovered.
So sad.
The following day, police in Waukesha County raided the Godejohn's home in Big Bend after locating Gypsy and Nick, who both surrendered immediately. They would both be taken in on charges of murder and felony armed criminal action. And I'll explain what that means in a second, because I didn't know. Gypsy was reluctant to confess her part in the crime, but Nick allegedly told authorities almost immediately, quote, "The truth is, okay, I'll admit it, I did actually stab her mom," end quote. So he, pretty much
just was
immediately was like, I did it.
Yeah. Well, there's no sense in lying. And it's kind of funny watching interrogation videos when people do.
When they try to lie, I have no idea what you're
I
talking
have
about.
no idea who that is.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Because literally we're just, I mean, here's a photo of the two of you together.
Photo of you killing her. We literally
You
have
were there.
with the murder weapon,
Yeah, with the
actively
murder weapon,
killing her.
This is you signing your name over and just saying, that's me with the murder weapon in that photo.
Exactly. Here's a video recording of you stabbing her and simultaneously shouting your name.
It's me, James!
And your birth date. Okay. Just kidding. So when friends and neighbors heard back in Springfield that Gypsy was safe, they were extremely relieved, but this was short-lived when they realized that not just Nick, but Gypsy as well were both being held on a $1 million bond. Greene County Sheriff Jim Arnott announced the news of the arrests, stating, quote, "Things are not always what they appear," end quote. He would also comment, quote, "Springfield is a growing community. We surround people with love and finances that we believe that needs it. However, a lot of times we are deceived, and I think this is not so true in this case at hand," end quote.
So this was the press conference. I remember this. This was the press conference when they had already had Gypsy and Nick in custody and had already begun to interrogate and all that other stuff and them confess. And he had this press release, but didn't specifically say her name or his name, and just said, "Things aren't always what they seem."
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God.
Like, what? It's like a
what
movie.
does that mean? Yeah.
The media would soon announce the truth of Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard's lives, stating that Gypsy had indeed never been sick and had always had the ability to walk, but her mother had made her pretend otherwise. They mentioned that Dee Dee used physical abuse to control her, and he urged people to seize all donations to the family's GoFundMe page that had been opened shortly after Dee Dee's death.
Oh, could you imagine, donating to the GoFundMe after her death?
For Gypsy's medical expenses
Yeah.
and for the funeral expenses.
We gotta keep this young girl alive if they find her.
Yeah.
Ugh.
A spokesman from Habitat for Humanity, the charity who built the Blanchard home, stated, quote, "We are just really deeply saddened by the whole situation," end quote. After news spread about the treatment of Gypsy, the sympathy changed from a victim of a violent murder to a victim of horrific, decades-long child abuse. While the charges of first-degree murder can come along with the death penalty, due to the circumstances, County Prosecutor Dan Patterson would announce that he would not seek it for either Gypsy nor Nick, due to the case being, quote, "extraordinary and unusual," end quote. Gypsy's attorney would receive her medical records from Louisiana, the ones that didn't exist apparently, and use that to help her case, and would ultimately seek a plea bargain for second-degree murder. At this point, Gypsy was so malnourished that her lawyer had informed the media that she had actually gained 14 pounds from being in jail, a situation in which most would lose weight due to stress.
Wow.
That was, a really, really key component of this. Look, very clearly she's malnourished.
Yeah, she was actually able to eat.
Yeah.
Using her mouth.
Yeah. In July of 2015, at the age of 24, and just a month after the murder, Gypsy Rose Blanchard would accept the plea bargain arraignment and be sentenced to 10 years in prison.
She was 24?
Yeah. She was 24.
And she was made to act like a child.
She was probably thinking she was 20.
Yeah, at most.
Gypsy's plea bargain did not require her to testify at Nick's trial, who was facing a more severe charge due to prosecutors knowing that he initiated the murder plot, and both him and Gypsy had actually agreed that he was the one who killed Dee Dee. In January of 2017, Nick's trial was postponed when prosecutors requested a second psychiatric exam. This exam found that Nick had an intelligence quotient, or IQ, of 82, was on the autism spectrum, and suggested that he had diminished capacity. Which, that was my first time ever realizing that IQ stood for intelligence quotient. I didn't know that. So my IQ is probably not that high. I didn't know that. Yeah.
You're in love, not a genius. 82, though, I think that the line, as far as what is considered below average, is like, what, 78? 76?
Well, I'm not sure. I think it's 80.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'm gonna Google. So you're right. This is from hrw.org. Quote, the vast majority of people in the United States have IQs between 80 and 120, with an IQ average, 100 considered average. And to be diagnosed with having mental retardation, a person must have an IQ below 70 to 75, which would be considered significantly below average, end quote. So that is from hrw.org.
Well, I'm glad you looked that up, because I didn't really know exactly what that average was. I really thought that 100 was average. I didn't realize it was like a spectrum of average.
Spectrum of average. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, and so he was an 82. That would be considered average. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that they would use that as a defense of some kind.
So Nick had actually initially waived his right to a trial by jury, but would change his mind in June of that same year. So in December 2017, the judge set Nick's trial for November of 2018. In their opening statement, the prosecutors alleged that Nick had deliberated for over a year before the crime on whether or not to commit it, showing his malice aforethought, because they had been talking for a while. The defense suggested that Gypsy had formulated the crime, and Nick was just so love-struck that he simply done as she had asked. The following day, text messages were shown by the prosecution to the jury, some being very sexually explicit, and from the week leading up to the murder. The knife used to commit the murder was also shown to the jury. In some of the text messages, Nick is seen as asking Gypsy about the layout of the home, Dee Dee's sleeping habits, etc., things like that. And following the showing of the text, the jury were shown a video of Nick's interview after his arrest, where he admitted to having killed Dee Dee Blanchard. Mm-hmm. While she was not required to, Gypsy did ultimately testify on the third day of the trial. She stated that she had indeed suggested that Nick kill Dee Dee to end the abuse she was enduring at the hands of her mother. She had also suggested that the two of them try to get Gypsy pregnant so that Dee Dee had no choice but to accept Nick into the family. That was like another option.
Dang.
Along with the knife that she would give to Nick at the home, she also stole baby clothes from Walmart so that either plan was ready to launch, essentially. Her reasoning for going through with giving Nick the knife that night was that he never told her how he felt about the pregnancy plan. She's like, okay, I guess we're doing this then.
Because
you never told me.
You never told me whether or not you actually want a baby. Even though these are all the wrong reasons why we should have a baby.
But if they had a baby, who knows, it might have saved Dee Dee's life.
That's true.
You know.
Might have saved hers, honestly, too. Gypsy's. Yeah. I mean, because how are you gonna... I don't know.
Like, you did that to your fucking child. Why wouldn't you do it to your grandchild?
Well, that's not essentially what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if she knew that Gypsy was pregnant, she might have done something to Gypsy and the baby.
That's true. So after 4 days of trial, the case was sent to the jury, who had multiple options for the fate of Nick. They could either find him guilty of one of 3 murder charges, so those being involuntary manslaughter, second-degree murder, or first-degree murder, or they could find him not guilty of anything. Mm. After only about 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action.
After 2 hours?
Mm-hmm. So if you don't know what this is, because I didn't, armed criminal action is the intent to commit a crime while carrying a loaded weapon. Okay. So honestly, a lot of people that get charged with first-degree murder probably get this charge as well. They just don't really mention it because it's like first-degree murder, like that's the biggest charge. Yeah. But they mention it in this one.
But he didn't have a gun.
A loaded weapon, though, a knife that's pointed somewhere is technically loaded. You know what I mean?
It's like, ready to go.
You know? In February 2019, Nicholas Godejohn was sentenced to life in prison for the murder conviction. Mm. Prosecutors had declined to seek the death penalty, and Nick asked Judge David Jones for leniency on the armed criminal action charge. This charge carries a minimum sentence of only 3 years, and Nick actually wanted to not serve any additional time for this, citing that he had been, quote, blindly in love with Gypsy. The judge did not buy Nick's speech about being a sucker for love and would sentence him to 25 extra years for that charge,
Jeez.
concurrent with his life sentence.
Whoa.
Nick's lawyer, Dwayne Perry, requested a motion for a new trial, which was denied by Judge Jones. Perry argued that the jury should not have been allowed to hear that Nick had considered raping Dee Dee on the night of the murder. And he also argued that the state's psychologist should not have been allowed to testify, and Nick's psychologist should have.
When did that come up?
Yeah, fucking monkey wrench in there. Just throw that in there.
Yeah, just throw that in there.
Yeah,
What?
so apparently they had told the jury that at some point, and I think that was one thing that Nick, like, might have said to Gypsy, and that's why it was in, like, it was in those text messages.
Yeah.
But it really, like, arguably had nothing to do with, like, the case, because, like, there was no evidence of that. Like, he clearly just killed her. So I think he was really just trying to, like, sound like a badass, honestly. Like, when maybe he told Gypsy. Either way, he was like, the jury shouldn't have been allowed to know that. Like, that was completely irrelevant to, like, what happened. But it also shows, like, he's clearly capable of murder. Who's to say he's not capable of that?
Right.
You know, and arguably that makes him, like, a worse perpetrator.
Do you think that... Okay, I had two thoughts. Let me see. Do you think that he would have tried to rape her or make it seem like that, like it was another perpetrator that came in and that's why the murder occurred, was because it was
a sexual assault
first?
I don't know. I really think that I haven't read the text, but I would assume that they might have gone back and forth a little bit on, like, ways to, like, play this out.
Yeah.
And maybe that was something that he just suggested, like, oh, I could do this, and then it would look like this, or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it was, like, planned, like he was going to, because it said he had considered it. Like, it wasn't part of the plan, he just decided not to last second, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's weird.
What was your other point?
I don't remember.
Okay.
That one took over.
Well, I also said that the argument as well for the retrial, or not retrial, but yeah, well, I guess retrial, was that the state psychologist shouldn't have testified, and Nick's psychologist should have.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, this guy obviously knows him more than a state psychologist that just interviewed him once, you know, so why is he testifying on behalf of...
the defense?
Yes.
Oh, I see, okay.
So, in denying the motion, Judge Jones stated that the court could find the point about the psychologist's testimonies as significant and consider it a reversible error. Although he has no possibility of parole, Nick is still holding out hope that, quote, there is something better waiting for me, there's a better verdict waiting for me, end quote. Of course, the Blanchards' neighbors were shocked to learn that Gypsy's illnesses were false. Aaliyah was noted as crying out in disbelief upon hearing that Gypsy had never been sick or disabled.
Because they spent quite a bit of time together.
Yeah, and, like, can you imagine feeling, like, so betrayed?
By your friend. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Aaliyah's mother would recall that nobody really ever asked for proof of Gypsy's ailments, but, like, who would? You know what I mean? That's kind of, like, fucked if you're like, yeah, let's see proof. Like,
yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Or you can't walk, show me. You know?
Show me.
Like, no.
Do it anyways.
Dee Dee's family in Louisiana, who had tried for many years to confront her about Gypsy's health, were not broken up about her death at all. Her father, stepmother, and nephew would later state that Dee Dee deserved her fate, and Gypsy had been punished as much as she needed to be for the murder. So they were like, Dee Dee deserved it, and Gypsy needs to be released.
Because she's had a lifetime of suffering.
Exactly. None of them would pay for Dee Dee's funeral, her family, and her father
Holy
and stepmother would ultimately flush her ashes down the toilet.
No, they did not.
Yeah. It's fucking nuts.
That's
dude.
horrific.
I know. It's not funny. It's not funny.
It's only kind of funny. It's not.
It's really not. But I know that the stepmom was like, oh shit, you tried to kill me. You know what I mean?
They're just
like,
ashes, but but still, like, I mean, that's not something that one typically does.
It's more of like to prove a point kind of thing. It's like a significance kind of thing.
Right.
You know, it's not really disrespectful.
It's for the living. It's
ashes.
not for her.
Yeah. So Rod Blanchard, Gypsy's father, was a little bit less aggressive with his approach. He stated, quote, I think Dee Dee's problem was that she started a web of lies and there was no escaping after. It was like a tornado got started, end quote. He also admitted to being extremely happy when he first saw a video of Gypsy walking on her own.
Oh,
I know, it's really sweet.
Even though it was in prison?
Yeah. Dr. Flasterstein, the pediatric neurologist who believed from the beginning that Gypsy was fully capable of walking, stated that this was only the second case of Munchausen by proxy he had ever come across.
It's very rare.
It is. He learned of the murder of Dee Dee when a former nurse emailed him the news story. He stated about this, quote, poor Gypsy, she suffered all those years and for no reason, end quote.
It's really interesting, and I think that's what makes this case so highly publicized and talked about, is because it's probably the most extreme case of Munchausen by proxy that's ever been, hit by media or anything.
Yeah. The doctor would also admit that he wished he had done more to help Gypsy. Mark Feldman, I mentioned him earlier, he's an international expert on fictitious disorders. He stated that this was the first case he had experienced in which a child killed an abusive parent. He had a very strong opinion on the fact that Dr. Flasterstein was made out to be the hero in a documentary about the case later on. And he would state about this, quote, "He had a gross misunderstanding of his obligations as a physician, as well as the legal requirements to report suspected abuse or neglect. This conundrum arises in case after case, where innumerable doctors have evaluated the patient, perhaps had questions they kept to themselves, and just proceeded to treat or make referrals and ditch the case that way," end quote. Ugh. I know. While a formal diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy for Dee Dee is technically impossible due to the fact that she is deceased, Feldman stated that after Gypsy's guilty plea, he was confident that Dee Dee had it. He stated, quote, "Gypsy was infantilized and kept away from her peers. She was a little more than a tool for Dee Dee to navigate through the world the way she wanted to," end quote. He also stated that it was, quote, "unprecedented in the 24 years that he had been researching the disorder for an abused child to kill the parent," which is really interesting because she was 24 when Dee Dee died.
Yeah.
Or maybe when she was arrested. But either way, like, that's how long this guy's been studying this.
Right.
So Gypsy Rose Blanchard is still in prison, her sentence actually being up in 2026.
Wow.
However, she is eligible for parole next year in 2024. And I personally think that she has a really good chance of getting out.
Yeah.
Nick will never be eligible for parole. Gypsy has made it very clear in multiple interviews that her and Nick are no longer together. She stated about this, quote, "He was very much like my mother in certain ways. Both of them were very controlling, and I feel like I was trained my whole life to do as I was told, and I feel like he wanted that for a girlfriend," end quote. Nick had his own things to say about Gypsy in his interview, quote, "Unfortunately, because of how far I went, I feel as if she's betrayed me. I feel that she's abandoned me," end quote.
He's probably still in love with her.
Oh, yeah. And in an interview in 2018, Gypsy was quoted as saying, quote, "I feel like I'm more free in prison than when living with my mom, because now I'm allowed to just live like a normal woman," end quote. Her idea of living like a normal woman is having to make about 8 choices a day. In the real world, you make about, like, what, 200 to 300 or something choices a day? In prison, I think it's like an average of like 8 to 12. Because you don't have a say in a lot of things that happen.
But that's still more than she had.
And that's still better than what she had. Like, I literally have full body heaves. Like, that's just so fucking sad.
Because she can choose to eat what she wants and what she doesn't want. She can choose to do her hair or not. She can choose to who she wants to speak to and who she doesn't want to speak to.
Exactly.
That's just incredible.
While serving her sentence in Missouri Correctional Center, Gypsy said that she had been able to research Munchausen syndrome by proxy, stating that her mother had every single symptom. She mentioned, quote, "I think she would have been the perfect mom for someone that was actually sick," end quote.
Oh, God.
I know.
Oh my gosh, that is heartbreaking.
That, like, actually choked me up. Like, I have, like, a little bit of tears. Gypsy stated that she believed her mom's claims that she had cancer, even though she knew she could walk and eat solid food. However, she always found herself secretly hoping that doctors would see past her mother's acts, and they never did. When asked by a reporter what made her want to escape her situation, Gypsy said that during the 2011 incident at the science fiction convention, she wondered why she was not allowed to have friends her age, or really at all. It wasn't until she met Nick, and he had become very serious about the murder, that she thought she would actually be able to get out of her situation. She also stated that she accepts that she committed a crime and she has to live with the consequences of her actions, but she also hopes that she has helped other abuse victims. According to Gypsy's family and reports, she also exhibits, at times, the same sociopathic manipulative behaviors as her mother. Mark Feldman commented on this, quote, "She is already psychologically really compromised, and she's going to need as much family underpinning and support as she can get," end quote. He also stated that PTSD is likely to be an issue in her continuing development, stating, quote, "I hope they find someone wherever she chooses to settle who is willing to provide supportive psychotherapy," end quote. You want to hear some good news?
I was going to say, just to touch on that just a little bit, I was going to say I hope that she is able to get the help that she needs, not only, like you said, for the PTSD that she experienced, but furthering, you know, her mental needs, that she's going to need structure. She's going to need that support if she does get out or when she gets out, because you said it's up in 2026.
Yeah, it's just such a traumatizing case. Like, it's so traumatic, like both horrific, like both ends, you know, and I feel so bad for Dee Dee, one, because she was struggling with this mental disorder. Yeah. And she obviously got murdered. And I feel so bad for Gypsy, too, because she didn't struggle with this mental disorder and she suffered from it as well. I mean, she felt like she really didn't have any other choice.
Who's to say that if either of them had gotten help, that Dee Dee would have been able to regulate herself, get the mental help that she needed, and that Gypsy could live a full-fledged life and not, you know, and they both could have lived through this, you know?
Who's to say that if Gypsy tried to ask someone for help out in the real world, Dee Dee wouldn't have harmed her further, potentially killing her, you know?
It's true. It's just all the times you were talking about certain situations with them, I just imagine the scenarios in my head, and it's always this very dark feeling, like a very dark color palette, you know, when I think about these scenarios with them. It's just, ugh.
Yeah. Now, while in prison, Gypsy was using a pen pal program to talk to some gentlemen, and she would ultimately meet and get engaged to a man by the name of Ken in April of 2019. They would reportedly call off their engagement in August of the same year, but Gypsy would meet another man by the name of Ryan Scott Anderson, and the two would actually marry on June 27th, 2022, and are still together today.
Oh, wow. Okay, so she's recently married.
Yes. Gypsy is working toward her GED. Where I saw the source, she might have already accomplished it, and apparently she's thriving. Her stepmother, Christy Blanchard, told the news, quote, "Despite everything, she still tells me that she's happier now than with her mom, and that if she had a choice to either be in jail or back with her mom, she would rather be in jail. For Gypsy, it's a lot of freedom," end quote. So, obviously, there's been a lot of documentaries and shows about the case, and the Blanchard family, especially on Dee Dee's side, are not too pleased with the shows.
Yeah, they feel like it's probably glorifying, just a very, like a stain.
Yeah.
Of some
Her
kind.
cousin Bobby stated, quote, "Dee Dee's sisters think it's pretty fucked up. They hate all of it. They don't know why people keep making stories about it," end quote. So just lastly, if you would like to learn more about Munchausen syndrome by proxy, or now known as fictitious disorder, check out our mental breakdown episode, because we did do that episode. But yeah, that is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, Dee Dee Blanchard, and Nicholas Godejohn. And cut. No, I'm kidding.
That
isn't it wild?
Is
I
wild.
know you've heard the story, but even hearing it again is just
I forget again. Like you heard me seething earlier. I was just like, I'm just fucking pissed. I just want to, you know, go back in time and punch this woman in the face.
Yeah, man, it's a really hard one. Like,
but
I
again,
get it.
Just to say again, she suffered from a mental disorder, a very severe mental disorder.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, where's the blame?
Yeah, I know exactly. Like, that's why it's such a hard one. It's like, who do you put the blame on? Like, do you put it on her for starting it? Do you put it on her parents for maybe causing her to have trauma that, Dee Dee's parents, I mean, for causing her to have trauma that developed that mental disorder? Right. Or, you know, you never know. And, you know, I, again, speak for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I personally think that Gypsy will not be a danger to society if she's released.
Isolated case. That's the way I feel about Menendez.
I think that Nick needs to serve the remainder of his life in prison, like he's going to. But I definitely think that every single person in this story was mentally ill. Yeah. Like, and not to say that Gypsy was, but I think that her mother kind of put so much trauma into her life that she almost, like, caused one to develop.
She was saying, you know, you're sick. You need to protect yourself from other people, germs, diseases. She used scare tactics in order to get Gypsy to do what she wanted to do because of her mental disorder. Mm-hmm. And she's there creating mental disorders, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, whether or not Dee Dee would have gotten help, you know, the damage was done, is what I'm saying. Yeah. And had either of them lived through this and unscathed, if you will, with even then with therapy and stuff, like, Gypsy would still have some of the things that she's exhibiting now.
I completely agree. If you guys are interested in looking at any, like, documentaries or anything on this case, I know that Mommy, Dead, and Dearest is, like, an actual documentary, and then there is a reenactment, like, kind of, like, not docu-series, but, like, a series called The Act. It's a reenactment, but just to shout out my girl Joey King. She's, like, one of my favorite actresses, and she plays Gypsy.
Yeah, and Patricia Arquette, who is, one of my queens, and she plays Dee Dee. So, yeah.
It's a really great show, and it honestly, like, kind of gives you a little bit more, and I'm sure they, like, fabricated a couple of things, you know, like, minimal, like, detailed conversation is probably not completely accurate, but it's really, really good show. And,
Right.
And I watched it, like, as soon as it came out. I was like, oh my god. But yeah, I think that's all I have. That was a whopper there.
Doozy.
Oh, but I think it's time for me to announce, I think, my 29th. Okay. So, not to be confused with the first case that I did for our bonus Patreon episode, the Toy Box Killer.
Okay.
I will be doing the Toolbox Killers for my next
Toolbox Killers.
Toolbox Killers.
Not Toy Box Killer.
Yes.
Okay.
Toolbox Killers. And that is Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris.
Interesting.
And they are some ruthless sons of bitches. They were some ruthless sons of bitches. And when I tell you, Patreon members, we never get a content warning. I almost still want to put one in, but I'm not going to, because you know what you're getting yourself into with the Patreon episodes.
Yep.
Just get ready, because it's fucking gnarly.
If you are interested in listening to the Toolbox Killers episode that Kenna is going to bring on the 29th of this month, which is July, depending on when you're listening to.
Boyfriend's Bricky.
We will be releasing that for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 Patreon members only. On that Patreon exclusive, you get no content warning, no ads, hardly any editing. And that's going to be like, sometimes we leave in coughs, honestly.
Honestly. Because you guys love us already.
Just raw stuff, because we know what you guys are into if you become a Patreon member.
Yeah.
And don't forget that even our Tier 1, which is the $5 tier, also gets ad-free episodes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm really glad that we were able to do that case, honestly, because I know that we've talked about it in, like, probably 8 of our other episodes.
I told you I was never going to do it.
Yeah.
Kenna and I sometimes, like, we talk to each other, we're like, oh, okay, you know what? I heard about this case, but I really want you to do it.
Yeah, like,
I'm not going to do it. I want
to
to listen to it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I want you to tell me about it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will see you guys on Monday with another Minty Bricky.
Minty Bricky.
All
right.
Love you.
Bye.
Your mental health is super important to us, so we're thrilled to announce that we are sponsored by BetterHelp to support you. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can access a network of over 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties and be linked with the perfect match. Whether it's via text, chat, or video call, you can talk to your therapist when it works for you. When it comes to your mental health, BetterHelp is a convenient and affordable option for therapy. Get 10% off of your first month at betterhelp.com/DAKPOD. That's betterhelp.com/DAKPOD for 10% off your first month.